Utilizing the technology of Avalara to calculate, remit, pay state sales tax returns gives me the ability to focus on everything else. Never again in my life will I have to personally file a state sales tax return. And that's a good thing.
Well, hi, Paul. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Miles Metzger. I am one of our solution consultants here at Avalara. My role with Avalara is I come in more with the tax technical angle and background. So I am a CPA and spent over 10 years in public accounting and private industry doing multi-state sales and use tax. So done everything from a small mom and pop shop to consulting with Fortune 500 companies on their sales and use tax. So very familiar with a lot of the intricacies when it comes to manufacturing. Primarily, my role prior to joining Avalara was consulting a lot of manufacturers. I was based out of Wisconsin and was in Baker Tilly, Deloitte, and then was with a large chemical company leading their indirect tax compliance too. So I'm familiar with kind of all this stuff as you are too, Paul, and kind of how there can be a lot of things kind of going on under the hood when it
Oh,
comes to
yeah.
that. Paul, why don't you, if you don't mind introducing yourself, your role, and kind of, what you bring to the table when it comes to tax, AI automation, and all that within your operations.
Sure. Okay. Paul Jackson. I'm the CFO at Aseptico, which is a dental equipment design and manufacturing company. We sell through many channels and around the world. We sell direct to dentists as well as through dealers to charitable organizations and government, military, state government, hospitals, you name it. It's broad scope.
So if I'm going into a dentist, that tray that's next to me, those tools are probably a lot of yours, I'm guessing, that you guys manufacture. Would that be correct? Or
So we have kind of two lines we do. We make dental motors. So the control console that controls speed and
oh
torque
yeah.
of the part you don't like, which is the drill, that makes bad noise. So we're the largest U.S. manufacturer of electric dental motors, uh, and that. The other side is portable dental equipment, which is one of our really interesting lines because that's what's used by a lot of the military, government, mission groups, those kinds of things. So it's basically you take a dental office and put it into a suitcase. It's got the water pumping and the vacuum and the controls and all that.
Yeah, oh, that's awesome. I totally missed the bar on that. I was assuming just the tools and everything. Interesting. One issue that quietly eats away, I think, at performance in manufacturing is, downtime, whether it's output margin, service level confidence, anything like that. To kick us off, can you give us a short version of, what's your world today and where downtime or any of that creates, pressure for the business? And do you see a tax impact with that as well? Maybe it's on sales, purchases, exemptions, anything like that.
So I kind of go two directions when you bring that up. One is, this morning we were talking about a product that we manufactured 5 years ago for the military, and now they want another batch of them, and several of the components are now obsolete. And so we can get some of the components, but the downtime, you could call it downtime, the inefficiencies of being able to assemble it part way while you're waiting for engineering and such to find replacement components is, you know, does really mess with your timing, cash flow, and all that. The the other side that's a little more tax related is when our customers are buying from us and they think they're exempt but then they don't have the right paperwork, and so obviously we run it through ECM, the exemption certificate management, and it is improving every day on its ability to review the certificates. But the back and forth sometimes with the customers before the order is final, so we can actually ship to them, can take a little while because lots of people don't really understand what they need to provide in their exemption certificates.
Yeah, that's a great point. I've seen that in practice over the years and still today, talking with all our customers. What do you normally find that, are folks giving you like a copy of their W-9 or things like that, where they think that's a certificate, but it's really not, or like a permit? What do they normally provide you that's, incorrect documentation that you guys are seeing?
Those things, probably the most often is their IRS 501(c)(3) determination letter.
Oh, yes. Yep.
And,
Yep.
as many people know, some states give exemptions to federally charitable organizations and some don't. And even there, it's even more difficult. I was working on in one state where a charitable hospital is exempt, but an educational hospital is not. And how do
Which,
you track all that? Oh my gosh.
yeah,
So
I always, yeah, yeah. Go
that's
ahead.
where I'm really hoping that Avalara's AI and that will take that next step and review those and ask the relevant questions and push back on customers when they don't have the right information.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's like what we're constantly developing. We've had a lot of AI that's been, released over the past, year or months or so, especially on the ECM side too, working to use more AI to, help validate some of those certificates as they come in, or, reject those certificates if it's not, what it needs to be in that format for that particular state. Those are all things that we're constantly working on developing. It's funny you say that on the 501(c)(3) thing, because I just remember like in when I was in Wisconsin, I'd get a lot of those same certificates, the determination letter from the IRS for my customers. And Wisconsin, for example, you need to go get like a CES permit number. That's you got to give them your 501(c)(3) status from the IRS to get it, but then you got to get that to put it on that specific form. So all those things, like you kind of mentioned, can lead to customer relationships, downtime in that sense of trying to get billing out the door and credits, rebills, all of that, a solution like ours, like ECM, can come in and kind of help, navigate that. I'm glad you guys are on that one because I think that's a really important one, in the manufacturing industry. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. It's on that, just another deeper level. Like 4 years ago, when ECM converted from cert capture and before there was really any AI in it, one of the things it would say is it would say this when it scanned through the PDF and was able to scan it, it would say validated. And so my people thought, oh, well, they've validated, Avalara has validated that the certificate is okay and good. I said, no, I know they're saying that, but that's the wrong word. They've been able to scan it, but you have to make sure it's valid. I am so
exactly.
excited about where you're going with the AI. I mean, I know it's not there yet, but it's getting there where it really will validate. You look at that state's rules for exemptions like the Wisconsin you talked about and apply those to that specific one.
Exactly. It's just there's a lot that we're going to be able to do with the AI now to make that process even easier for our customers, that you don't have to go in and look for those kind of elements, or you can change it, to like right now you can select to auto validate just to kind of get things through the door, quicker. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity there. We're going to see a lot of growth in the industry, with that kind of functionality there. What are you as a manufacturer doing? With AI? Are you guys using that in the manufacturing operations? Is it more, back of the house, in the office, or what is your kind of AI story?
We're not real big, so we don't have a formal AI policy, which I know is a problem because everyone says you should. But things we are doing, our engineering group, some of our developers there are using AI to be more efficient in developing code.
Yep.
We've all heard that that's very common. We're doing that here. You talk about compliance, and there's lots of different spins on compliance. We're a medical device manufacturer, so we run into compliance issues with the FDA and with the Europeans with their medical device directive and all those kinds of compliance things. And my regulatory guy has been using AI to help him sift through some of those wordy documents
Uh,
faster. Now,
Yep.
he always validates it. Does this make sense? If he has it right, something, he always edits it and makes it um, more accurate because we know about hallucinations and those kinds of things. That
Yep.
that's what we've done so far. Where we're going is we're currently on-prem with our ERP solution, Epicor, and
Okay.
we're in the midst of a migration to cloud. And one of the reasons for that is so that the 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 gentleman that's going to take over and run the company for the next 20 years, he's in his 30s and uses AI. So we're moving to the cloud partly because we just have to, but also partly so that we can embrace Epicor's version of AI, which is called Prism, and utilize that. How we're going to use it, we're still figuring that out.
What would you say, Paul, like over the next 12 months here, what is your kind of biggest goal company wise? I'm sure there's always like, revenue metrics and everything, but is there like a big data goal or a big indirect tax goal or something that you guys are working towards that is a big driver for your company due to maybe organizational or outside pressure, internal pressure? I know you're kind of going through that change internally with the new CEO too. So what does that kind of look like for you guys right now?
So that's really my primary thing right now is getting this live and stable and efficient on the cloud ERP of Epicor. And then once we're stable there, start figuring out what benefits we can get from the tools that are now available, like their Prism AI, their Grow reporting tool, those kinds of things. And, you know, continuing to watch the development of ECM to truly validate the certificates.
Yep.
Is it, that of anything within Avalara other than doing state income tax, that's where I see the biggest help to organizations.
Agreed, agreed. Because I always say this too. I think because like once you kind of have us plugged in on the calculation side, that's a pretty well-oiled machine. It just does all that. The
Yep.
ECM, there still is that somewhat element of that human touch that we might always need to have. You never know, but the more we can get it, fully autonomous through I think that will drive a lot more efficiencies. And I just think of how many times when I was at my manufacturing company, like credits coming to me every day, like, is this certificate valid? Is this certificate valid? Is this certificate valid?
Yep. Yep. Here's an interesting one on the compliance side and downtime, which has to do with rare earth magnets. Okay, so we make electric motors. Electric motors use rare earth magnets in them because and especially the ones we have, they need to be autoclaved, so it has to be heat resistant. Well,
Okay.
with the restrictions of China on rare earth magnets, there was about 5 months where we couldn't get any, and so we were not able to manufacture or ship or provide motors during the last 2 months of that because we used up our supply, and that the whole political world like that um, can be really disruptive to downtime and manufacturing efficiencies.
Have you seen, I guess, in the past year, the tariff impact on your manufacturing operations?
Absolutely. One was the direct impact where we had tariffs on our brokerage bills. Some of those were pretty significant. As we were negotiating, one of our suppliers was moving their manufacture of a particular product from Pennsylvania to Brazil, and the tariff impact of that, and negotiating the pricing and such as they made those changes. So those have been kind of direct, but then the indirect side of that's really been impacting us. You talk about margins and all that is all the price increases. The people are doing price increases partly because of tariffs, partly because of oil, and will we ever get those back? My experience is unless you're in a commodity market like metal or maybe plastic, you never claw those back down when those increases have gone forward.
Yeah, yeah. From like a manufacturing standpoint, Paul, what's one thing that surprised you the most in the last 12 months?
That we actually are getting refunds on tariffs,
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah,
you
that
know?
was, how was that process been? I know like Obviously, the Supreme Court had the case that came down and said it's unconstitutional, but then, I think then at that point everyone's like, well, are they going to refund it? And they are, but have you had to like then go through a whole application process and all of that, or?
Well, as I learned in taking economic classes, the answer is always it depends. So the the
Example of
the
that.
UPS and FedEx, they're just automatically going through and will claim they will file those, get the refunds, send us the refunds.
Okay.
Our broker, they happen to have said, well, if you want us to do this, these are our fees. X dollars per application, X dollars for this, X dollars for that. So with them, we're losing about 10% of our refund in paying them processing fees.
Okay.
But okay, I don't have the wherewithal. We don't have the team to do that. So it's like, having Avalara do my state sales tax, I'd have to hire another person if I were to do that in-house, and it still wouldn't be accurate. To do all this on the refund, I'd have to hire another person for a month, 2 months, whatever, and it still wouldn't be as accurate. So yeah, it's worth the cost to get it done right.
What's something that you learned that not necessarily a mistake, but something you learned from that you kind of corrected maybe going forward in your operations that you'd maybe strongly advise other manufacturers to avoid, whether it's manufacturing operations, tax, whatever it may be?
Well, I'm on the finance side, so that kind of leans towards a certain area. And um, one of the things that we did wrong before we implemented Avalara was we treated every charitable organization as exempt,
Mm, yep,
no matter what state, matter what type. And
yep.
don't do that. It's not true. It's not accurate, and it's going to cost you a lot on audit.
Yeah, I always mention like whenever I'm talking to manufacturers, exactly in your instance. I don't know if this came up in like a normally California and Washington are the big states where a lot of nonprofits are taxable,
Right.
like school systems in California, for example. You got to charge them tax, and that doesn't qualify, and things like that. That then California, Washington, those are big audit risk type states and states with big audit departments and all that. So yeah, that's a really good one actually. And I think people just think by nature you're a nonprofit. I don't have to pay tax, which is not necessarily true everywhere. So
Exactly.
hey, if you had one final piece of advice.
Utilizing the technology of Avalara to calculate and remit, pay state sales tax returns gives me the ability to focus on everything else. Because never again in my life, I'm getting old, never again in my life will I have to personally file a state sales tax return. And that's a good thing.
Agreed. Yes. Yeah. No, I like that one because it is timely. Like, and that's the like kind of like I mentioned earlier. Even like with the AI stuff, like we're our goal for that is to save time for customers on this.
Yeah,
You'll see at any trade show where it says less taxing, more relaxing, and I think that truly is the top's goal for everybody with all of this. So I completely resonate with that.
cool.
Paul, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. We value you as a customer. We really value our customers' opinions and feedback on everything. So we really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to us about your business, manufacturing in general, what you're seeing, and how Avalara has helped you along the way. So we appreciate it.
You bet.